tantric yoga and tantric philosophy, which is like a subsect of all the different movements, because, again, yoga is thousands of years old. There's many different perspectives and many different stories within yoga itself, type of thing. So if you
Mhm.
look at like tantric philosophy, a lot of philosophies before tantra, were based in this concept of, I'm suffering, how do I get up and out?
Mhm.
And tantric philosophy kind of comes at it from this perspective of, I have moments where I'm suffering, but at the end of the day, because I'm alive and living, I'm going to always encounter moments of friction. So it's not
Mhm.
about how do I get up and out. It's more
Mhm.
about how do I live the life on this plane that I'm on right now in such a way where I can more easily navigate the ups and downs, ride those waves.
Am I
Yeah,
good?
you're good. I think
Uh,
we're good to go.
Cool. Well, then, welcome to another episode of Stillcast. Today, I have a fun guest on. It's funny, that intro is kind of the same a lot of times, and that's all right. But I have a guest on that is really well versed in the world of yoga. And fuck, I haven't had that yet. And it's might as well bring that on to the show, and it's a big part of this work going within. I myself don't have a massive amount of experience there. The amount of experience I have in yoga is very, very minimal. But I've learned a lot from Jay, and we actually met because in the beginning, he was one of my clients. And that's something I've been doing more of too, is like bringing clients on. But bringing you on, Jay, was really predominantly about talking about yoga, but then also you happen to also have been a client of mine.
Yeah, definitely. No, thanks for the intro, Phil. And yeah, I guess first and foremost, I think I want to just make the kind of statement out there that, even us yogis and people that practice mindfulness all day, every day, still need someone to talk to. And I think it's important to make sure that you have someone in your life that you can talk to, whether it's a coach or a therapist, a friend, a family member. But especially in coaching and therapy, I find it's really nice to have an unbiased party to talk to. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I reached out to Phil. And, Phil offered many different perspectives that I hadn't even received in the mindfulness field that really helped me continue to grow and evolve. And so I think it's really important for anyone within the mindfulness space, and especially in the mindfulness space, but outside of that too, to have someone who you can talk to, an unbiased party. You don't even have to have anything that you're really working through in your life, but just having someone to catch up with, and talk through what's on your mind, get stuff off your chest, and be able to bounce ideas off of. It's a huge help. It was a big help to me, and so grateful for Phil to have been that person, and also to have him bring me on here and talk about yoga and mindfulness.
That's beautiful,
um,
man. Thank
yeah,
you. That
you're
felt
welcome.
good to receive.
Good, good. It's good to receive too. That's something I've been working on as well, receiving the feedback, especially when it's positive. I think, it can be hard sometimes to receive the positive feedback, just as it's hard to receive negative feedback, and just be
Hmm.
like, yeah, I am doing good. I am
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, and it does get easier as we go along this path that's ongoing, where the teacher remains the student, and the student becomes the teacher, and it's cyclical. You know,
Hmm.
but yeah, before we started working together, you've had a lot of experience helping people, teaching people, predominantly in your local community, which we'll talk more about. But you were already doing the work, but you stepped into a space where you could learn a little more, and I think that's the stuff, man. We got to keep growing and keep pushing the fold, if you will.
Completely agree. Completely agree. Yeah, I mean, I think it's something too where, sometimes when you have a powerful experience. So for me, I got into yoga because I grew up with severe OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And yoga was my saving grace. And it was a powerful tool, a powerful experience that allowed me to, wean myself off of the various different medications I was on at the time, find better health and well being. And at the same time, as much as that was a powerful experience and I found a lot of benefit from it, there's still so many other different modalities and practices out there that can be just as powerful. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's important to not get stuck into one practice or another, because there is so much more out there. And all those little perspective shifts allow you to grow more and more. There's
Yeah.
this concept in yoga called satya, which is truth, right? So it's the practice of truth. And I think one of
Mm-hmm.
the cool things when you dig deeper into satya is this idea of, how do we define truth, right? We have
Mm-hmm.
observed truth, something that we can all, have consensus on, right? If I, pick something up and I drop it down, right, it's going to fall, gravity and all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Observed truth. But then you have all the individual truths, right? Different stories, we have different perspectives of the world. And one of the beautiful things I love about the idea of satya and the concept of satya and knowing truth and how to find truth is this idea that you get closer and closer to observe truth and to a deeper understanding of truth when you look at things through many different perspectives, many
Mm-hmm.
different lenses.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this could benefit a lot of people in society, just in terms of if they hear something, oftentimes we have a judgment. And that
Mm-hmm.
judgment, while it may feel true to us originally, if we leave space for it to evolve and hear other perspectives and viewpoints, oftentimes that judgment, that initial judgment might fade away, and that judgment itself might evolve, and we might come deeper and deeper into a place of truth.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to put a finger on exactly how it works, but I really feel that, any judgment that someone has is, if nothing else, a reflection of some form of judgment that they have within themselves. And
Mhm.
it's all like cyclical, if you will. And like rewiring the mind, I was talking to someone earlier today about it, and it's like, you say rewire your subconscious mind, rewire your brain. It sounds simple, but there's so many components to it, and it's an ongoing journey. And I think that something as simple as not as simple. I think something even like yoga contributes to it because there's so many different levels to yoga, and it plays into mindfulness, and it's a whole world that I'm not even that familiar with, and I've like I said, learned a lot from you, but getting into it myself is going to be very, very interesting. And this is kind of like my kickoff sort of call to like make it be something I do. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about today, which I think would be beneficial to other people too. I mean, there will be people that listen to this podcast that already practice yoga and are familiar with yoga. But I think that we're also going to have a lot of people who maybe have never done it before, the same people who, historically speaking, the idea of meditation is like, what, And so, what would you say is like a good approach for someone who maybe they don't have a lot of experience bending their legs in certain ways and stuff like that? I remember the first yoga class that I went to, the lady was like, it's entry level yoga. And I was like, all right, and I get in there and it's like, the third thing they're doing, I'm like, my body doesn't do that. I don't know what you guys are doing, but so any guidance in that world would be great. Or that
Definitely,
area.
yeah. I think first and foremost is to understand the difference between asana, which is the physical practice that you're talking about, the poses and stuff, and then the practice of yoga.
Mhm.
So, there's 8 limbs of yoga, and, we could go on for hours and hours about each of those limbs, but just, out of those limbs, right, we have this physical practice, the asana, right? The various poses that we go into. And oftentimes in the Western world, a lot of the yoga practice is an asana practice. So it's physical movement, it's the poses.
Mhm.
And I think that that's great. Like asana is a great way into meditative states. It's a great way to, it's going to automatically engage your breath, especially if you're holding something like a plank, right? Your
Mhm.
breath's going to start to move a little quicker. You're going to become aware of it. You're going to feel the sensations of it, right? So that's all a nice way and a nice entry into the body. But I think it's important to think about asana in its direct translation, which is a seat, right? So for me, and just historically in yoga, going back, many, many years ago, especially pre-colonization, a lot of the yoga practice was seated postures for meditation and breath work, or in yoga, what we'll call pranayama. And those seated poses were for those practices of going deeper through inquiry, self-inquiry, through meditation, right? Using the breath to build up energy and to notice what happens in the emotional state and in the mental state. And also contextually, like when yoga started, it's at least, in South Asia, started to build up, a lot of it was coming about because people were suffering. And so people
Hmm.
wanted to figure out a way to liberate themselves from that suffering and to heal themselves there. And so I think it's important just to context that, because when you go to a yoga class, you're likely going to be going to an asana practice. There's going to be elements of yoga built into there, that overarching yoga, right?
Hmm.
But most of it's going to be the poses. That said, I think it's important to look for a teacher who acknowledges the history of it, acknowledges the context, and acknowledges that, hey, what we're doing here is asana. And we're also going to bring in some elements of yoga, but, making that distinction there. So, you know, the miscommunication of yoga, stops
Hmm.
happening in a way where it's just about the poses, right? And I
Yeah.
think your experience is a good example of that, where you get in there, you're like, oh, it's a beginner level practice type of thing, and then third pose in, you're like, my body doesn't do that, right? um and I think a lot of people have that similar experience, and sometimes it pushes them away from the practice.
Hmm.
You might say, oh, if that's yoga, then I can just go and do Pilates or do a HIIT class, or any other physical fitness routine out there type of thing.
Hmm.
um so I think, going back to the idea of asana and the direct translation of it being a seat, right? For me, it's a seat for exploration. So we can get into these poses and explore those poses, how they create space in us, how they engage us, physically, but also mentally and emotionally. But we could also just sit cross-legged. We could lay down on the mat. We could kneel. Any of those positions, and we're still going to have that inquiry and that self exploration just by sitting and holding space for ourselves. So I think when you get into yoga, I think it's important to find a teacher and play around with many different teachers and many different styles and find what your body adapts to. And also, find someone who's providing context, who's providing the history. And it's not
Hmm.
just, you're here for the hour for one teacher to just say a bunch of cues about postures. You go through those and then you leave. Because again, you could go to any physical practice for that.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. That's beautiful. I had no clue that that was the depth of it. I know we've talked about different things, but I don't know if we've gone over that before. And if we have, it didn't stick the way it did today. So, yo- yoga is essentially a type of meditation, and it's not what we've been indoctrinated to believe. It's not like in a malicious way, but it's that's just how we perceive it. Normal people, whatever. Yoga is a meditative practice of doing a bunch of stretches, but what you're saying is no, that's asana. All the different stretches or whatever. Am I saying that right? Osana. um
Awesome.
asana, like, well, not really.
It's
um
all
asana,
good.
right? So but then yoga itself is what you're saying is a type of meditation.
I would say yoga itself is a lifestyle. So, also as part of those limbs, you have the yamas and the niyamas. Essentially, things to do and things not to do, essentially. So, one of the yamas and niyamas is ahimsa, which is, do no harm, essentially, nonviolence, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, we could take that in many different ways. And so that's why yoga, I think, is really a lifestyle. It's a practice where you're learning about how to live your life in a more wholesome, holistic, and healthy way, with many different intentions, right? So I think one of the reasons why when yoga got brought over to the West, it became boxed up into more of this physical practice is because in the Western world, that is a lot of what the Western world needed at the time, right? It was like, we see currently, there's a chronic disease epidemic happening in the Western world. We have a lot of people that are, sitting at desks all day, every day, and their bodies aren't moving, and they're feeling stuck, and, they're finding weight gain and all of these things that are contributing to these, chronic health epidemics that, oftentimes, it really is up to the person to be able to move through that. And so I think when yoga came to the West, probably a lot of teachers, a lot of the Indians that came over to the West to share yoga with the Western culture, brought over the traditions of yoga, the lifestyle of yoga, all the different teachings. But what a lot of the people here took on was the
Mhm.
asana practice, because it was like, oh, this is something I'm moving my body, I'm stretching. And because of that, I'm feeling healthier, I'm feeling more spacious,
Mhm.
all of those things that are benefiting us. So again, it's not to say that the asana practice is a bad thing. It's just to
Mhm.
make sure that
Mhm.
we have the full context of everything there.
Yeah.
And, and so I would say yoga is more a practice of living, how to live your life and how to set yourself up in a way where not only can you empower yourself to make change, but you can also take a moment to reflect and meditate. And, that's another element of those eight limbs, right? Is the meditation practice, like going inward, self-reflection, learning from going inward. One of the things, I think is there's value to it all, right? The Western world oftentimes in a health perspective likes to poke and prod. It's observation from an outside perspective, right?
Mhm.
A
Right.
lot of Eastern philosophy is observation from an internal perspective. And there's value to both, And so I think that's where sometimes when we are just focusing on the postures themselves, sometimes we miss the opportunity to observe internally, and we can learn a lot about that.
Yeah.
Some things we just can't measure, but we can measure ourselves, how we're feeling, the sensations we're noticing,
Yeah.
the ways we react to a pose or someone's words, right? And if we're taking time to step back and pause, we can actually get an insight into that.
Yeah, thank you for this because this is really helping me a lot, and I think it'll be helpful for other people as well. So, mindfulness, like when I think of mindfulness, there's two different things that come to mind. There's mindfulness as it's perceived by, Western culture, Western society, but then there's mindfulness that's like more, meditative or whatever, holistic, being present with your thoughts, managing your emotions. All these things contribute to being out in nature, meditation. It all contributes to living more mindful. So, someone who is more inspired by Eastern philosophy or whatever, and actually does live a mindful life, does that make them a yogi or no?
Yeah, I think it would. I mean, it's again, I think that, you could attach a label to a lot of things.
Uh-huh.
I think the thing I will say on that is like yoga in many forms, especially when you get into yoga philosophy, is a practice of understanding the power of story and narrative, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so we have all these things that we utilize to connect with one another. And mindfulness is that buzzword there that we utilize to connect each other. So the general population, when we say mindfulness, says, oh, that's like yoga or meditation or breath
Mm-hmm.
practice or like living a life where you're aware of your surroundings and stuff like that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we can communicate to each other efficiently through that word because in general there's consensus around what that word means.
Yeah.
So you could say that someone living a mindful life is a yogi, right? Because yoga is a practice, it's a lifestyle of how to live
Mm-hmm.
a life that's more aware, that's more conscious, that's more liberated, and also provides a space to learn how to hold space for yourself and as well as holding space for others. All of that falls under mindfulness, right? It's just the way that we describe it. And I think that, there's a there's there's a beauty to story because story allows us to connect. It's what we've done
Mm-hmm.
for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Humans always connected through story.
Mm-hmm.
But you could also say, if someone asks you, hey, Phil, what do you do for a living? You're going to have an answer for them. And that's a story, right? Because you could
Right.
change that story at any point in time that you want to, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could go from, hey, I'm a coach to one day, I'm a dog dad to another day, like I'm just a human being on a beach type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is, you can characterize it in many different ways. But the story allows us to connect and start to understand each other a little bit. That
Mm-hmm.
said, story is imperfect because our words are imperfect. There's certain words where one person might, be responding to a word in one idea space, and another person may respond to that same word in a different idea space. And so that's where
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you get miscommunication, right?
Yeah.
So words are imperfect, which means story, while it's beneficial to connect, is also imperfect. And
Yeah.
yoga really offers, at least in the philosophy realm, a way to step back from the story so we can
Yeah.
see it and then change it and shift it. And then I think find power and liberation from understanding the power that story has.
So then, a quote unquote true yogi would not refer to themselves as a yogi
Hmm.
because it's a label.
Yeah. I
That's where
think
I was
they
going with that, you know? Like, I mean,
I
someone
would
who's like, I'm a yogi, it's like, well, you're kind of attaching to, an identity there. Whereas someone who's like really living the life, they're probably not saying that they're a yogi. They're just living the life of mindfulness. They're like in tune with this.
I would
That's what,
agree with that, and I would also add that it would be someone who is able to jump into a story and out of a story at will. Right? So,
uh,
like tantric yoga and tantric philosophy, which is like a
mm,
subsect of all the different movements, because, again, yoga is thousands of years old. There's many different perspectives and many different stories within yoga itself, type of thing. So, if you
mhm,
look at like tantric philosophy, a lot of philosophies before Tantra, were based in this concept of I'm suffering. How do I get up and out?
mhm,
And tantric philosophy kind of comes at it from this perspective of I have moments where I'm suffering, but at the end of the day, because I'm alive and living, I'm going to always encounter moments of friction. So it's not
mhm,
about how do I get up and out. It's more
mhm,
about how do I live the life on this plane that I'm on right now in such a way where I can more easily navigate the ups and downs, ride those waves. And so I
mhm,
think a great example of like a tantric yogi is someone who would sit down in the morning and they open up the newspaper and they read about someone got robbed last night. And then they would
mhm,
sit and meditate and they'd put themselves in the perspective of the person that got robbed as well as the person who did the robbing.
mhm,
And, try to, as best as they can, think about what would it be like to cause me to go and rob someone? And what would that feel like? What would that be like, type of thing? And then on
mhm,
the flip side, what would it be like to be the person being robbed? How would
mhm,
that feel? Right. So they can see the various different elements in the stories there. So I would say it's someone who doesn't necessarily label themselves and just practices, right? It's that whole
mhm.
concept of like show, don't tell.
Yeah.
And also someone who can own a story when they jump into story and also seamlessly step out of story. And that's like a lifelong practice.
This is really, really, really cool, man. You're making me even more interested in yoga. But what I'm realizing now is that, and I'm sure that this is something that you find in working in yoga, is that I would assume rather that a lot of the people that go into the doors of a place where they're going for yoga, they're going because someone said, well, meditation and yoga is good. Okay, I'll go do some yoga. You know, it's you're probably not often finding someone walking in the door who's like already aware of the depths of yoga, and so it's like, what are they really going for? I think for me, it was, and there are people like myself too, where it's like, I have history meditation, getting control and awareness of thoughts and being more present with nature and all these good things, but I've just always heard that yoga is a fantastic complement to that. But
Mhm.
still, the thought of, well, that means that I'm going to be doing a lot of different poses and stuff. So someone like myself, you know me now, but whatever the fuck, someone like myself, I come into your location and I'm like, hey, this is me. Where would you point me? Would you point me in the direction of doing asana,
Awesome.
or
You
would
got it.
you point me in a different direction?
Yeah. I would say for the general Western practitioner coming into the room who has the story of yoga is good for flexibility, yoga is good for stability, it's good for the mind, it's good for the emotional state, type of thing. I would take the standpoint of, go and do the yoga practice and there's going to be asana involved in it, type of thing, but just know that there is a greater depth to it, right? I think it's it's the idea of like follow the path of least resistance. Or
Mhm,
on the flip side, one of my favorite teachers has this quote, Yoganand Michael Krell. He says, "Don't go around shooting other people's sacred cows," type of thing, right?
mhm,
So if someone came in and they have, they're coming to yoga because they have back pain and they heard that back pain can be supported through the yoga practice, type of thing. I'm not going to go and tell that person, hey, this isn't what yoga is. You should go out the door and like get back into the world and go do some Pilates or something like that. Like they're
mhm,
showing up try and heal and find themselves, I'm going to say, come on in, welcome, welcome, right? And oftentimes when I start a yoga practice there, before we even jump into the movements, the first thing I do is I have people center and I say, take a little moment to pause here and just listen, right? The act of listening is just the act of observing noise. And we can
Mhm.
observe noise externally and we can observe noise internally. Once
Mhm.
you've done that, acknowledge your intention for being here, right? You came
Mhm.
here for your low back pain, right? Great. Acknowledge that. Acknowledge the sensation you maybe feel right now.
Mhm.
And then anything else you're bringing with you through the door, there's no reason to leave that at the door. Welcome it, right? So if you came in and you felt excited, but you had some back pain, acknowledge the excitement and the back pain. If you come in, you
Mhm.
felt stressed and anxious, be like, hey, come on into the party, anxiety. That whole process of starting to see yourself through a different lens, right? To see yourself as not necessarily the sensation, but something bigger than the sensation.
The observer.
So an observer of that, right?
Yeah.
Because sensation will rise and fall, and it always does. The
Mhm.
observer is that place behind it where you can see the sensation happening. And as you
Mhm.
start to do that more and more, you start to realize, oh, wait, I'm not the sensation. I'm not someone with low back pain. I'm not that story. I'm someone
Mhm.
who's currently experiencing that, kind of like what we talked about with like my OCD. I remember, Phil, we were talking when we first got into the coaching, and I was telling him my story about OCD, and I said I had struggled with OCD. And he
Mhm.
gave me a little pattern interrupt there. And he's
Mhm.
like, you struggled or did you experience? Right. And so, like,
Mhm.
it's that same idea. It's like, okay, I'm
Mhm.
experiencing it at this point in time, but it's not me. Right.
Mhm.
So, I think it's important to, when you enter into a space, go for the intention you have, but just
Mhm.
keep that extra space open in the mind and the body
Mhm.
to know
Mhm.
that you're also going to likely find something else along the way.
Yeah.
The person who created Kripalu Yoga, Swami Kripalu, he's since passed now. He brought it over into the West in the 60s and 70s. And, he has this quote of yoga is like a pearl bead necklace. If you pick up one of the beads, the rest of the beads are going to follow. Right. So
Uh-huh.
if you pick up the physical practice, while you're focusing on that element, you're going to pick up the meditation side of it. You're going to pick up the breath side of it. You're going to
Mhm.
start to be in poses where you feel strong sensations and you're discerning between, is this good for me? Is this bad for me type of thing? So there's the discernment element, and then in the release, there's that sweetness, there's that liberation. So all of the different 8 limbs, you could think about the 8 limbs as 8 beads on that pearl necklace. They go
Mhm.
hand in hand. You pick up one, you're going to get the other there. It's
Mhm.
just understanding that when you are picking up that one, it's connected to a bunch of other things rather than just a single bead that you're picking up there.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, now I'm just curious with the guy that's coming in with the back stuff going on, and you're welcoming him and all that, which is good. Do you do you then like say, yes, this will definitely help? Just so you know, there's more than just stretches involved. We're also going to be doing some stuff with our mind and stuff. Or do you just leave it as, yeah, come on in and sign up for the class, and they'll take care of you in there?
Yep, I leave it more just as it is. One, because I don't want to make any promises. Like
Sure.
there is good evidence and research that, a lot of the yoga poses support alleviating back pain. And,
Mhm.
there's years of anecdotal evidence, thousands of years of anecdotal evidence on, yoga having all these benefits. And
Mhm.
then, 20 to 40 years of more empirical evidence. And a lot of that research is still being done because yoga is so vast, but
Yeah.
I can say, yeah, doing locust pose, right, where you're on your belly and your heart's lifted, your arms and your legs are up there, right? That's something that could help support back pain there.
Yeah, and
But I
they don't need to necessarily be dialed into whatever metaphysical stuff, whatever, to get the benefits. They can really just do the pose, maybe do a deep breath and get the benefit.
Exactly. And like for me, oftentimes when I teach, again, it's that welcoming, it's that setting, it's that acknowledging of attention, and then it's just starting to get into your body and getting people used to this idea of it doesn't have to look like what you see in a magazine or what that.
Mhm.
It's about what you feel. And if you're moving slowly and you have your breath there and your
Mhm.
breath is full functional, right, you're likely going to be in a safe place. And then as we go deeper and deeper into the practice, and there's all these different, I'll weave in philosophy, I'll weave in these various different concepts. I'll have people focus on different sensations that they might be feeling in their body.
Mhm.
So through all of those experiences, people go deeper and deeper inward. And eventually, at the end of practice, is where I find most people, wow, maybe some of their back pain has subsided. They're feeling a little bit better. They showed up. And it's always like, I think anyone's going to feel good when they show up to something and they do it and they get through
Mhm.
it, no matter what the practice was. It's
Period.
like they showed up,
Yeah.
and that's like awesome, right? And it's
Mhm.
in that place where I think that is where, as a teacher, you can start to weave in some of the deeper depths of yoga and the vastness of the practice of it being more of a lifestyle.
Mhm.
Because sometimes also, like if you think about it, if you're coming in and you have severe back pain, then oftentimes your mind's just going to be thinking about the back pain there. And no matter how much I talk about philosophy and the meaning of yoga and the vastness of it, that person might not be able to digest any of it because right now it's just like my back is screaming, you know?
Mhm.
But if they go through the practice and they get to the end of it and they've alleviated some of that and they're a little bit more open, now their mind is also a little bit more open to tap into the understanding and to consider those different elements and those different philosophies. So at least like that's my strategy.
Yeah. Do you think that or does it ever pop up in those scenarios where it's like a pain that say someone is like, this pain's really blah blah blah, but maybe they're not really into the whole world of everything, but you then will still tell them, or I'm asking if this is something you do,
Yeah.
um, where you're like, well, part of this is feeling the pain and like not trying to fight it, or
Yeah.
is
Definitely. I mean, it's coaching them a little bit on discerning sensation, right?
mm,
So what I'll say is pain is typically characterized by sharp shooting sensation, right? It's
mm,
like if you fall on the ground as a child and you bang your knee, right? You're gonna get that sharp shooting response that you have, and it's like, ow, like
mm,
that's typically pain. And while it's important to notice and acknowledge that pain, it's also important to, back off when that happens, right? So if someone starts to enter a pose and they're like, ooh, ow, right? It's like, don't go any deeper. Don't try to push it there, right? Don't try to
mm,
bear pain there, right?
mm,
And then discerning discomfort, right? So discomfort is not necessarily that sharp shooting sensation. It just might be friction. It's that feeling of tightness, of things being clogged up. And so
mm,
it's coaching a little bit on what is the difference between pain and discomfort.
mm,
And then also I would say more importantly, like similar to what we were just talking about earlier, of that idea of your sensations are not you. Your
mm,
sensations are constantly changing. Your
mm.
back pain, it may feel like it's been here for years and years, but when you grew up, when you were first born, probably didn't have that back pain, right?
Yeah.
It probably happened over time after doing some sort of repetitive movement or sitting at a desk all day type of thing, and things get compressed and stuck. But you're greater than that because you have the ability to change that. So it's kind
Mhm,
of getting people coaching. I would say one side is coaching people on discerning between pain and discomfort in that moment.
mhm,
And then the other element is trying to get people to start to identify that they are not the identity of their sensations, they are bigger than that. And
mhm,
the sensation is more a wave that they might be riding for a moment. And sometimes that wave just builds and builds and builds for years and then it crashes
mhm,
down, right? So it has that
mhm.
ebb and flow.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe it just depends on the person, right? Like someone who's super analytical and they've had back pain for a long time. I just fucking back pain. I heard yoga's good for it. Like that person, what else could be beneficial for them is understanding the power of their mind, doing the work to rewire their mind and lessen the tension, the stress that's there in their daily lives to help mitigate and alleviate that pain. But at the same time, coming in, trying to say that to someone like that, they may not, but they'll do the yoga because they heard it's good. But then as they get into the yoga, they start to potentially open up to that being a part of it.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things that I tend to talk a lot about at the end of a yoga practice, when everyone is in Shavasana, the final relaxation corp pose, is this idea of, you may come to yoga for better flexibility, better stability, strength, stress reduction, right? And all of those things are great. You're going to likely get them if you go with the intention and you show up and you show up consistently.
Mm,
But underlying all of that is this oscillation that we do in yoga. When we
Mm-hmm.
go to the physical practice of yoga, we're oscillating. We have moments where we're in a pose, we're holding plank pose, right? We're breathing there, we're coaching ourselves a little bit in our mind, and then we release plank pose and we just rest for a moment. We breathe and we catch our breath and we feel that release, that sweetness on the other side. And then we go
Mm-hmm.
back into another pose. Or sometimes, like in a flow class, we're just constantly flowing. Even in a
Yeah.
restorative class, like there's some poses like in yin or restorative yoga where it's still going to bring a lot of sensation, even though it's, considered more of a gentle practice. And
Mm-hmm.
then, but we still have a little bit of moment where maybe some heat's building up, we're feeling discomfort, and then we
Mm-hmm.
shift into the release and we feel the sweetness. And it's
Mm-hmm.
in that oscillation where we're finding balance. And in
Mm-hmm.
Shavasana, in that final release, that's that place where we've oscillated back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in a conscious, efforting way. So when we finish, now that conscious, efforting way is just natural. It's not something we have to really work towards. And I think that's why people, when they walk out of a yoga class, they oftentimes feel that like, feeling a little bit lighter, feeling a little bit more free, or feeling like they can go with the flow more. It's
Mm-hmm.
partially because they've spent an hour consciously breathing and moving their body, and now they
Mm-hmm.
don't have to think about it, but they're still conscious as they go back into their day there. So,
Yeah.
like, underlying it, outside of all the different things you may go to yoga for, underlying that is an opportunity to reset yourself in your story, to reset yourself in your day, to reset
Mm-hmm.
yourself in your life, to find just a moment of liberation, moment of freedom, moment of connection that just
Mm-hmm.
keeps you going throughout your life. And also over time makes it more easy to navigate that life.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Everything you're saying is beautiful. I want to go a little bit woo woo just for a second.
So,
So, um, some people may come to yoga because they heard that they can awaken their third eye by way of Kundalini yoga. And so, curious your perception of that. And part of that question is that I've also heard that if someone is just like, I'm going to go straight to awakening my third eye and I'm going to use Kundalini yoga, but they haven't done any of the other work, that it could be bad news bears for them because they haven't done the other work yet. And so I don't know, is that just some tale, or what's your perspective on Kundalini yoga and the power of it awakening or opening the third eye, if you will?
yeah, I think this is where context is really important. My personal practice is a very spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken me some time to really find the balance between, the spiritual side of it and then just the general practice philosophy side of it, right? And just what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing here and now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so an example of that, I was in a training once on pranayama, on breath practice, and the teacher said, you know, pranayama not practiced mindfully can become poison to the body.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, whoa, that's intense type of thing. And then
Mm-hmm.
on the flip side, pranayama practice mindfully can allow for liberation and enlightenment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, then you think, okay, well, what's enlightenment? What's liberation? What's all these different terminologies and everything? And for me, I walked away from that training feeling a lot of power from pranayama. So I
Mm-hmm.
got deep into breath practice. And every day I would wake up and I'd do all my different pranayams I had there. I'd charge up energy. And it was always something that I'd come back to and I'd be like, okay, I'm feeling stressed or I'm feeling anxious right now. I'm just going to go and breathe, right? And in
Mm-hmm.
that moment, it would help for a little bit. But sometimes later on, I'd feel more agitated. I'd feel, disconnected. I'd feel like I just want to stay in and I don't want to go outside my shell.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kept going and I was like, okay, well, I just should come back and do the breath practice. Eventually I'm going to get liberated and go up and out type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I like took a pause and took a break from that practice that I realized that because of my own misunderstanding of the story of the words of pranayama and the benefits and the reasons for practicing it, that it had actually become a poison to me in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It became something that I just retreated to as a way to try to fix something rather than, building my awareness or charging up my energy to find free flowing movement. Um, and I also found that, because I wasn't aware of it and I was just using it for that respective, thing, I would get to places where I'd get in my day and be agitated. And I'm like, why am I so agitated? And then, in hindsight, it's like, well, because you just did like 500 Kapalabhati. It's like a rapid form of breathing where you're just like huffing and puffing. Like, of course, your nervous system's going to get burnt out doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that it's contextual and it's really about understanding not only, if you go look at the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, there's some really, there's language in there that if you read it at face value is like, wow, this could like, Kundalini energy is going to rise up my spine and it's going to free my mind and poof, I'm going to dissolve into this wonderful mist type of thing, And, it's one of those things where it's like, if you think about it contextually, like the Indian culture in general has an epic way of telling stories. You think about like the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, like that is an epic novel in a lot of ways. There's a recent movie that came out, RRR, that came out of Bollywood there, or Tollywood, I forget. I know there's two different like main ones there.
Uh-huh.
And that was a movie, and it's so epic, and I love the movie and I love the storytelling there. But a lot of the storytelling that's done to share some of these ideas and these philosophies and these practices are provided in a way where it feels epic and it feels like there's this big transformation that's going to happen and everything. So if we take that at face value, we might start to believe that, these practices are just going to fix us immediately. We're just going to dissolve into this, beautiful dust, and life is going to be great and fine and dandy. Um, but it's similar to, like, I think about like the Bible, for instance. Like there's certain verses in the Bible, if you take it at face value, that could create some harm in a lot of places in the world type of thing. And it has, right?
Yeah.
And I think the same thing is true for some of these practices. It's understanding how we tell stories. And sometimes telling an epic story is a powerful way to connect with someone and set someone off on the path there. So again,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a bad thing. It's I think I love the Indian culture for that, is the epic storytelling that happens there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think it's also important to understand the context and the reason for that. Part of the reason is it's a way to get people into the practice. It's a way people to go, oh, maybe I can find this big transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, understanding that it takes a lot of time to get to that place where you may find more of that enlightenment, or where you get to that place where you hear about yogis who can like slow their heartbeat down to like nothing, that it's almost immeasurable.
Mm-hmm.
um you know I think all of those things are possible, but
Mm-hmm.
those yogis didn't get there by just huffing and puffing their way through life.
Yeah.
They got there not only through the practice off the mat, but by living the life off the mat, or practicing
Yeah.
on the mat, but by living
Yeah.
the life off the mat, by
Right.
being graceful, by being humble, and then just showing up to experience, not going
Yeah.
at it with any story. If I do this, then this is going to happen. More so just showing up to be there and feel and observe. And so for me, as I started to find the agitation and almost the poison that I was giving myself from not understanding the context and not taking a step back and not giving myself time to restore, I
Mm-hmm.
realized that I was just creating more imbalance. You can't, I think it's something that, as much as we may want to just go, go, go all day, every day, I wish there was another hour in the day for me to do things type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's almost like I wish there was 23 hours in the day instead of 24 hours in the day. And I say that
Mm-hmm.
more so from the sense of like, it would be great if that final hour of the day, 23 to 24, everyone just got an opportunity to pause, not just go to sleep, not do things, but just pause and sit with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another great reflection from Swami Kripalu is like, for every hour of practice, you need 4 hours of reflection. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a beautiful way of, being humble with yourself and how you go about the practice, because you might do a practice and be like, wow, that was a powerful experience. Me with yoga, I came out of OCD, I was loving yoga, I was like, everyone needs to do yoga type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was because I had a powerful experience. But a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people can get to the states of being that I've been in without the asana practice, without some of those elements
Yeah.
to it. Right? I
Yeah.
think about like my wife, for instance. Like, she doesn't necessarily practice yoga all day every day like I do. She doesn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily practice meditation all day every day like I do, but she's a farmer. She digs in the earth. She's connected to the
Yeah.
earth. And
Yeah.
she has this wisdom and this I would say this mindful energy about her that oftentimes I learn more from her than she learns from me in terms of
Yeah.
all the world of yoga there. So there's many ways to get to those states, and I think
Yeah.
it's contextual.
Yeah, I would agree completely with that. I think that in essence, it's another tool, another way of life that you can incorporate that all dances in the same area of the science of happiness, which is seen in so many historical ancient cultures and ways of being. And as you put very eloquently, it's is yoga and meditation, um, the way that it's perceived in Western culture is it's put in this little box because we don't have the time. But the reality is we do have the time. It's just perception of how time works. But it's really just the way of being. That book, Wherever You Go, There You Are. I don't know if you've read that one. John Kabat-Zinn, I think is his name. And he teaches the reader how to incorporate mindfulness and meditation in their day-to-day life. And I think that's where I was reading that meditation specifically, it's putting it into a capsule for Western society, when in Eastern cultures this is just how they fucking live, you know
Yeah.
and that's the whole thing. So you don't necessarily need yoga to accomplish, or any component of it to accomplish, these states of being and ascend consciousness and open the third eye, or tease it out, or whatever the fuck, however you want to look at it. It's but yet it's just another way to do it. It's another way to find it. And
Yeah.
from everything that I've learned about yoga, it's got me intrigued. I definitely want to dive in more to it, but I'm not certain where I would find somewhere around here. And this might be something that you could help with, in terms of you mentioned the power of trying to find someone that is aware that yoga is this and asana is this, and like that there's different levels to the shit, and it's not just some gym class. Because I feel like if I go to my gym where they have yoga classes, it's probably just somebody that they gave them a sheet and they're like, here's the poses, kind of thing. So where would I even find a place like that, I guess, would be a good question.
Yeah, I think it's, if you're in your local area, I know my local area. Like,
Mhm.
I could give you places around Martha's Vineyard to go to for that, and
Yeah.
I could give you some places around Massachusetts and New England type of thing. But,
Yeah.
California, Florida, all these different places, it's a whole area. So, in terms of the listeners here who I imagine, come from all over, I would say, if you want to get into your yoga practice, if you want to start a yoga practice, but you want to be in a place where it's, the vastness of yoga is invited into the space, and it's
Mm.
not just, poses that are given and, you do this routine and then you're done type of thing. If that's what your intention is for, and your intention is to expand consciousness as well as to address various different health things in your body, play, like go out, take a class from this teacher, take a class from that teacher, try a different style, do some classes in a studio, do some classes outdoor, do some classes on Zoom, go to YouTube.
Mm.
When I first started practicing, I was in college, and I had been experiencing OCD for many years at that time. And I finally took my mom's advice to go and try a yoga class. And I just went to the class that was closest to me. It was a community class on college campus. It was free, which was great for me in my college days type of thing. And I
Mm.
just showed up there, and I just listened and, took instruction type of thing and went through it. And I was like, wow, I'm finding a lot of benefit from this type of thing. So then I was like, well, I want to do more of this, but this class only happens, on Wednesdays and Fridays, but I want to do it more frequently because I'm finding so much benefit from it. So I started to seek out other areas, and I just kind of Googled around on YouTube. And I tried a lot of different teachers on YouTube. I tried a lot of different, teachers on, in studios and outdoor settings and stuff like that. And, eventually I found people that maybe spoke a little bit more to the vastness. I was like, oh, they're hitting something on philosophy. It's not just cueing of postures here. Let me go
Right.
back, like talk with this person a little bit more. Um, and then I would say the other thing is, going back to that pearl bead necklace example there. if you go to a couple different asana-based yoga classes and you get a couple poses that you like, maybe you have mountain pose, you have your forward fold, you have down dog, plank, and your cross-legged position. You could create a whole yoga practice from those 5 poses or whatever it was, that I said there alone, if you take it from the perspective that asana is a seat and it's a seat for exploration, right? So I could
Mhm.
stand tall in mountain pose here, and sure, I could just stand there the whole time and just wait a minute and then release it and then go to the next pose. But I could also stand here and be like, what if I do this? Oh, that's kind of cool. What if I do this? Oh, I'm feeling it in my neck here. What if I move
Mhm.
my hands like that? Oh, that's kind of cool too. And what about this? Oh, yeah, that's kind of cool, right? So then one mountain pose becomes this whole living, breathing pose, and beyond just me stretching and moving my body, I'm now tapping into more of the vastness of yoga because I'm
Mhm.
tapping into sensations. I'm tapping into my own consciousness there, and I'm
Mhm.
breathing and I'm thinking and I'm assessing the feelings that
Mhm.
I'm getting in my body. And boom, now I've just spent 5 minutes in mountain pose, but I've been
Mhm.
moving around the whole time and wiggling and exploring, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's how we go deeper and deeper into it. And then, I think if someone really wants to explore the depth of yoga, teacher trainings are a great way to go about doing that. But also, teacher trainings, it's a double-edged sword in the yoga industry because, in the Western world, there is an element of how our society operates and economy operates. And many people are driven by monetary value.
Mhm.
So I think, one of the tough things that has happened in the yoga world is someone finds a powerful experience. They're like, wow, this is amazing. I want to share this with other people, right? It's all based on good intention. So then they
Mhm.
go and they take a teacher training and they come out of the teacher training and they feel amazing and awesome. And they go, I'm going to start a yoga studio. So then they go and start a yoga studio. And then they get into the yoga studio and they're like, oh my God, I have all these overhead costs because I'm renting the studio out. I need to buy all these props. And then I need to fill the space to actually make money for it. And so then you start to get faced with all these ethical dilemmas. Do I pay my teachers enough and take the loss myself? Or do I take more money for myself and then teachers get paid less than minimum wage type of thing, but I'm making a profit at that point? And so
Mhm.
it gets into this whole funkiness there, and so I paint that picture to note that sometimes what happens is, people have struggles with building out their yoga studio and they go, well, I could do a teacher training. And that could be a cash cow for a lot of people, right? It's like, oh, I
Mhm.
can, charge people $2,000, $3,000 a head for this training. I get 20 people in the room there. Bam, now I'm making a lot of money. But
Mhm.
if you didn't go to a training that explored the depths and the vastness of the practice, that honored the cultures and the people that brought us the practice, the South
Mhm.
Asian cultures like that, then you start to move away from yoga and just more to another pose-based practice.
Yeah.
And now you lose the depth of it. And all the
Right.
teachers that go and train under that miss the whole philosophy, the whole history, the whole context there. And then they go out and they might do the same thing. And so it's a balance. It's not, again, not to say good or bad. There's benefits to just doing a pose based practice. And with that
Yeah.
idea that pick up the pearl bead, everything else will follow. But
Yeah.
if you're not aware that there's other beads attached to that necklace, then it's just you're picking up that one bead again and again. Um,
Yeah.
so going back to your original question to kind of sum that whole line of thought up
Mhm.
is be playful, explore, check out many different teachers, try to connect with teachers who are from the cultures that brought us yoga, right?
Mhm.
And for me, obviously, that's not like the best business proposition for myself because I'm like a white male here thing. But at the same time, I think it's important to go and take practices from people that brought us yoga, the South Asian cultures that brought us it. And so
Yeah.
find teachers or who are from those lineages and have that background and can speak to it.
Yeah.
And then as you explore and play and you start to get a repertoire of poses to work with, if you want to like let the physical practice be your practice, then think about asana as its definition, as its translation, right? A seat for exploration, and then explore
Mhm.
it there. Change your breath, right? You could just take a long inhale. You could pump
Mhm.
your breath. You could make sound in your breath. Right? You could play with it all you want. You just have to be open to
Mhm.
playing.
Yeah. Yeah. Play and explore. which I talk about a lot with the people I work with. When you look at what ails most people, and you look at the world in the way that a lot of Eastern philosophies, look at it with regard to the inner child. We're just kids that were indoctrinated to have to do society, and
Mhm.
at a very simple level, the more that we tap into the kid in us, the better shit gets. And so with yoga, it's no different. Explore, have fun, and find your tribe.
Exactly. 100%. And also, I think we had talked on this, at one point, we were talking about the idea of life being this game. And,
Hmm.
like, I think you just, you said it in a really nice way there. It's like, when we were raised as kids, we were kinda just plopped into this society and this story of how society operates in it. And, obviously there's things that are out of our control. And, part of the practice is learning what you can control and what you can't control. And as
Hmm.
much as you may want the world to change and everyone to work together, go back to the barter system type of thing, like,
Hmm.
there's billions of people on this earth with different intentions, different ways of operating, different ways of living. And
Yeah.
so when you think about that, it's a place of, going, oh, well, I could suffer trying to control all of this and wanting something to happen, but not
Hmm.
actually getting that thing happening. Or I can play, right? I can play
Yeah.
and I can change up models and, insert myself here and be like, ooh, I'm playing the role of, someone going to work today type of thing,
Right. Right.
and
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
that idea of it. I think it makes it a little bit lighter, a little bit easier to take on.
Yeah. Hell yeah. So if anybody is intrigued by you specifically and would like to learn more about you, where would they go to learn more about you?
Yeah, definitely. So you can check out my website. It's wholesomemv.com. I do a lot of in-person offerings on Martha's Vineyard, where I live here. I feel very fortunate to be able to have found a place here. It's seasonal mostly on the island here. So in the summertime, I'm doing a lot of the in-person group classes and private experiences. In the winter time, fall, winter, spring, I teach a lot of yoga in the schools programming. So that's my main focus there. But wholesomemv.com is my website. For social media, my Instagram is at Yogi Jay, YOGIJAY. And I put a lot of different content up there in terms of, ways to practice thoughts, as well as many times just like sharing about my classes there.
Yeah.
I have a YouTube channel. It's called Yoga Meditation and Breathwork with Yogi Jay. I had
There you
done a
go.
little bit early in the pandemic, and then I stopped uploading videos. And just recently, I've been doing a lot more. I've been trying to do once a week, so trying to grow
Nice.
that there.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Um, and then if you ever just want to reach out to me personally, again, my email is on my website there, and I'd be happy to work with you one on one and share some more information. I'm always happy to help educate and point and offer suggestions. And as a teacher, that's what I think. Oftentimes, I'm not even a teacher. Oftentimes, I'm just a guide, and,
Yeah, yeah.
so,
That's
so,
really
so
it.
that's
That's
for.
really it. That's the whole thing with what you do, with what I do. We're guides. There's not a, and that's something that, the revelation with you, with working with me and stuff. It's not that there's that part of our ego or subconscious from old ways of thinking that's like, eh, I'm the guy. And it's like, no, we're just people, like, not just people. We are people like anyone else, but we're helping other people by way of our ability to guide. And we just, I have a natural ability, you have a natural ability. Some would say it's synchronous. It's at the best interest of the universe, or the universe's desire for us to be in the roles that we're in.
Nope.
But all I know is, out of all the people that I've met in the yoga world, I really am thankful that I got the opportunity to have you be the first yoga person on my podcast. There may be other people in the future I talk to about yoga, but man, whatever they say, I'm going to come back to you though. I'll be like, hold on, I had somebody else and they said this. What do you think? What do you think, Jay?
I'm always happy for more discussion. And again, like, I think it's, my hope for the world of yoga and the people practicing, and, the folks in the West that are, having businesses around it and stuff like that, is that we all try to create more collaboration and step away
Mhm.
from competition, because we all have
Yeah,
something to offer. And
yeah,
also, like, I think a lot of people appreciate what I offer, But there's going to be
Definitely.
some people that just don't appreciate what I offer, and that's okay because there's
Yeah.
another teacher out there, there's another guide out there who's going to
That's right.
offer something and it's going to click with that person. So there
Hmm.
is, for me, especially in yoga and wellness, there is no need to compete. All
Right.
there is a place of showing up, connecting with people, holding space for people, and showing people the power of holding space. And
Yeah.
I think my my final comment on this would be like yoga is a practice where we can learn to hold space for ourselves, and in doing that it makes it so much easier to hold space for other people, whether we
Yeah.
love them and we agree with them or whether we have feelings of friction and we disagree with them.
Yeah.
um, but we learn to hold space, and I think that's also what we could all use in this moment, myself included.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Amen, brother. It's all about the present moment, even though previous versions of myself that sounded super simple and woo-woo, and it's like, get the fuck out of here. But the more you get into it, the more you realize, no, they really are saying something. There's something here. So, dude, super thankful to have you on the podcast today. And I would love for us to have another podcast in the future where we just talk about God knows whatever else. Because when you and I talk, we talk about a bunch of different spiritual theories and ideas and all that sort of stuff. So I would love to do that in the future. But for now, brother, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, Phil, for having me. I appreciate it. And best wishes to all the listeners and all the people out there. You all, deserve a space of wellness and feeling good.
Amen, brother. Amen, brother. All right. Well, hey, guys, you heard it from the man himself. You heard it from me. We love you. You should love yourself too. Until next time.